Welcome guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other debatable host,
Brian. Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, fine. I feel like, it's been so long since I've seen you, so it's hard to kind of really get a handle on what we should be doing here today.
Is that also potentially because there's a PC screen in between our faces right now?
Yeah. I think that could be contributing to it. I feel like I'm talking to, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking to a priest. Actually, that's what it is.
It's definitely adding an anonymous factor. Like you're giving me some kind of a confessional tip.
Confessional tip is actually the name of my sex tape. Okay. So Buffy the Vampire Slayer. What do you think about Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
I think it's good. Do you think it's good?
It's fine.
Great. Okay, this has been Buffy Boys. For more insights into whether or not Buffy the Vampire Slayer is good.
Okay, I'm going to do the Buffy and summary, which is a thing that we do.
Yeah. For episode 20 of season 4.
Yeah, season 4, episode 20, The Yoko Factor. It was directed by David Grossman, who last directed Superstar, and it was written by Doug Petrie, who last wrote This Year's Girl, and was first aired on May 9th, 2000. Okay, here we go. Adam kills Forrest. On Adam's orders, Spike sows hostility between the Scoobies, playing on Giles' and Xander's sense of uselessness and Willow's fear of rejection. Buffy storms out. Angel comes to town and he and Riley fight. Angel and Buffy quarrel. Riley is summoned by Adam. The initiative has captured so many demons its cells are full. So yeah, it's an unusual episode because it's so specifically setting up the finale. Mm-hmm. But it's good. It's good, I think. Kind of good. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it. But before we get into talking about how and why we enjoyed it and why it was good, for this week's Bronze Banter, I am very keen to talk about a little television show on Netflix called The Babysitter's Club.
Yeah. What did you think of it, Joe?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I don't know anything about the Babysitter's Club. I think you and I had to have a reasonably lengthy conversation beforehand where you contextualized to me what it even was.
Yeah.
I kind of heard of it before, but it's up there in my brain with like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. It's like I don't know what any of these things really mean.
Yeah, it's slightly more contemporaneous than those. It'd be more contemporary. It'd be a contemporary of like, say, the Goosebumps series. It was kind of the girls' version of like a Goosebumps books. Mm-hmm. By all accounts, probably a lot more meaty than the Goosebumps books.
Yeah, and not Supernatural. I was expecting Supernatural when we started watching.
Oh, were you?
Well, because I just assumed because everything's kind of either a mystery or a monster, you know. But it was great.
Yeah,
really a sleeper hit for me, and the premise.
You say sleeper hit, but you cried during the first episode. So
well, yeah, but I didn't know I was going to cry during the first episode, so I was a sleeper. And the premise like basically being, okay, you have these like teenage girls kind of. 12 to 14, I think that's pretty accurate. 12, 13.
I think they're all pretty much 12. But yeah,
in America, and they come together, and they some of them are friends, some of them are new to town, and they contrive this club where they are expert babysitters, and they're going to like babysit for all the kids in the area, and in doing so, teach the kids lessons and learn things about themselves as well. So it's obviously an attempt to update a kind of a more retro format, and it has a number of really strong and really compelling and really watchable points to it that I really devoured. For one, I think they did a rather admirable job of justifying some of the conceits of it being like we have to use landlines and we can't just Google everything, and just by the various restrictions of my dog is really strict, so he only gives me an old Nokia block phone and that kind of thing. So I think they managed to keep the essence of that kind of small town, pre-internet vibe, while still being, very accessible, very like the references when you have adult writers writing references to Zoomer culture, it is so often incredibly cringy. Talk my head, all the kids love the Fortnite dance or whatever, but I actually felt that some of the references and the kind of the contemporaneousness of it was really on point, or really believable, at least as far as I could tell.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really good. There's a couple of great notes about it. One is that Alicia Silverstone plays the main character's mother. Alicia Silverstone played what was her name in Clueless? Oh, I should know this because it's
Clueless.
It's all based on Clueless was based on Jane Austen's Emma. I can't remember her name in it. It was something ridiculous, but She played that, and she didn't do much else since, unfortunately, because I fucking love her.
Cher Horowitz.
Cher Horowitz. I should have known that, yeah. And they make reference at some point. They're like, "Oh my god, mom, you're so clueless," and I was like, "Oh, it's like the movie that she was in the 90s. It's a reference to that."
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. But yeah, overall, also like so a couple of different things. It really didn't talk down to the kind of age group that it was dealing with. It kind of had a variety of voices. It was quite diverse as a cast, but also like variety of like levels. So some of the cast were verbose, angry, really
articulate liberal kind of thing.
Exactly. And some of them were like just like more creative, a little less well spoken, a little more kind of like exploring kind of what their identity is becoming. The representation of different diverse viewpoints is great. And and there was a great episode with a young trans character, which was really, really distinctly well handled and the right level for this kind of age group, in a way that again wasn't talking down or wasn't diminishing the impact that these kinds of issues have on young people.
I think it managed to have an actually quite effective impact by, as you say, not speaking down and picking the right level and really being thoughtful in that regard. Mm-hmm. Because if we take that example just as that episode as an example, so you have one of the kids they're babysitting is a young trans girl. The parent, you're immediately looking for certain red flags, certain pitfalls. Is it going to be about how is it going to be condescending in how it describes it? Is it going to be overly medicalized in some way? Is it going to be about how the kid's parents don't accept them and they're going to suffer and all that kind of stuff? And crucially, is it going to be about how this 12-year-old babysitter can solve all these problems with a well-placed anecdote? And none of that happens, You have a fresher kind of a story where the child's parents are understanding and accepting, and one of the reasons why the babysitter is returning to this situation is because they get on quite well with the kid. But when the kid is put in a hospital situation where there isn't that level of care being shown, that is exactly the kind of situation with adults where a child could potentially say, hey, she's clearly presenting as a girl, she clearly is a girl, address her by her proper name, you're making her uncomfortable, and this is what I need you to do here. Mm-hmm. That's all
what she says is like, this kid's clearly already stressed and distressed and upset, so don't add to that, clearly. It was really good. And
there's a whole rake of just each episode has a rake of not just like issues of the week or very special episode kind of stuff, but just represents different kinds of families, different kinds of situations, all in the same believable and equal tone. I felt it was incredibly tight writing in that respect.
Yeah, it was specifically well written. There's an episode where there's a big wedding and one of the characters is quite upset that she feels like her mother's remarrying and she feels like she's going to be forgotten about to some degree. And the episode kind of like quite extensively explores their relationship and just the genuine relationship they have together. And also she gets her period during that episode for the first time. And it's a kind of like, it's not celebrated necessarily, but it's
definitely not stigmatized.
It's not stigmatized, and it's not shown as something to be fearful of. It's like, I don't quite know what's happening. Other people around her are like, well, we got you. It's good.
Other people her age as well, crucially.
Yeah. Anyway, really liked it. I think it's worth a watch.
I think it's worth anyone checking out because I think something we've underplayed here is it's very funny.
Yeah.
It's breezy. It's like a light 25 minutes, 30 minutes.
10 episodes in the season. Yeah,
they're funny. All of the girls are likeable. The main character is dumb as rocks and I love her for it and I'm very protective of her because of that.
Yeah.
So speaking of people who are dumb as rocks, we see in this episode of the Scooby Gang everyone being a big idiot about a lot of things.
Yeah, so this is the episode that kind of, I remember this episode as being reasonably filler and reasonably like nothing, and it was just like an episode that like brought us towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. But actually it was quite engaging. I think the writing was quite structured, which I always appreciate. So the very beginning of the episode is Spike having distinct conversations with all the Scoobies in very specific structured framing or structured sections, I suppose, where he sows his discord, being the Yoko Factor, as he explains multiple times during the episode. / once. But yeah, and then at the end of the episode, when the core four all break apart and go their separate ways to some degree, setting up the finale, I thought that conversation and that argument was really actually both foreshadowed through the season and something else. I forgot the name, what I was going to say there, because our dishwasher just interrupted us for about 3 minutes there. But yeah, so I mean, like, the foreshadowing through the season, that was great to this point. So throughout the season, the different elements here in terms of the upset, I think the Buffy on Summary did an okay job this week, actually, to be honest. But I think the causes for upset are a little more complex than they've portrayed. So you have Willow and Buffy's relationship becoming strained. Through the season, Willow has expressed a couple of times that Buffy doesn't really seem to be engaging with her problems. Mm-hmm. Buffy is only present for Buffy drama at the moment, which, you know, it's kind of lead character syndrome. Additionally, Willow is experiencing a very vulnerable formative experience in the sense of being, like, you know, really, like, I mean, specifically coming out to her best friend last week and experiencing this new relationship, saying goodbye to Oz. So I actually didn't remember that they actually used the word girlfriend in this episode, which I really appreciate. Mm-hmm. We can talk about that later. But yeah, it was so I can totally understand Willow's perspective there. Xander is becoming more and more isolated from the group, feeling more and more useless. He's very much been kind of stuck over in this corner with Anya for the season, not experiencing college, realizing he's more and more useless. Exactly, yeah. And Buffy, I think, hasn't really had that kind of development in some degree during the season. Her worry is that she's going to be left behind by her friends, or people are going to abandon her due to her worries with her father and stuff. And what happens? Oh yeah, and then Giles, of course, also is feeling quite useless, and like he's lost his purpose in life, which was to be Buffy's watcher. So great. That's all been, like, I think, very well established through the season, especially in episodes like Fear Itself, which really reflects all of these concerns and actualizes them in front of them, but also through the various episodes through the season. So I thought it was really good. So obviously those are the kind of the hurdles that the gang has to overcome in this episode, that they're going to have to overcome in the next episode, and then that they're going to have to really process in depth in Restless, which I'm excited about, obviously. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it's a great example of how you get good payoff for good character development, because any of those individual beats throughout the season, you know, were slower and take time to build. But now when, you know, Xander complains about feeling like the mundane and not being of any use, and that, you know, Willow talks both with Tara and in general about being more distant from Buffy, that rings completely true, and you can see how the stress is put on them, and also this theme of whether they can effectively help Buffy when they're physically much more in danger than she is has come up again and again. Did you just make a reference to Monster of the Week? I may have done. As you know, but it's very, like, it's very in keeping with the characters to date, and it's also plausible. Like, I can feel, if I'm in this situation, I'm going to feel like what's the role I have as the chosen one and her merry friends. And I think it characterizes so effectively Spike's greatest strength, which isn't beating people up with fists. It's a really sowing discord. Yeah, it's a really acute way of turning his truth teller role into you know, truth, kind of like occlusion, you know. And knowing, having infiltrated enough to know just where to put the pressure and to be believable while not actually being caught up in the events. So I think it's a really good term for Spike and for James Masters as a character. You know? Yeah, it's quite good. It's quite well handled. So yeah, and like the conversation at the end is just, it's really good. It's very, like, tense. It's very uncomfortable. You can see all the missed connections, and the issue there, of course, being that, like, they aren't communicating with each other well. They haven't communicated with each other well in a while, and they're just, every opportunity to kind of, like, figure things out, to be like, wait, I didn't say that, or I don't think that, they storm over because they have their own emotions, their own pain. And that's something that they, I think these are all normal adult figuring stuff out things, and that's all great. I love it.
I also appreciate that the most mature character who could actually usually facilitate these kind of discussions, Giles, is just flat out drunk for the whole argument.
That was great.
Laughing at Xander's suggestion that he might get shipped off to Fort Dix.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
So some good character work there, and I think absolutely, like integrating Willow's coming out and that not being kind of a one and done thing, but kind of an ongoing concern for Willow that's treated in the same vein as Xander being concerned that he isn't appreciated, Willow being concerned that Buffy is freaking out over her Tara being her girlfriend very specifically, and something which I didn't remember about this arc for Willow, and not to put too fine a point on it, but she never apologizes for being gay.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no aspect of like, I understand why this is freaking you out, or I'm so confused, or this is that. She recognizes that because the only problem is entirely in the interface of Buffy et al. Dealing with it, which I think is really positive messaging.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. Actually, yeah, let's get into that. Okay, so you have some great gay content here. For one, did you ever see that Twitter tweet where someone says, "If I'm reborn in this life, I'd like to come back as a gay couple's cat"?
I have not seen that, no.
It's so true, because the queers do love cats and do be taking care of them very well. So, as shown by the fact that our fat fluffy boys over on the couch right now, like sleeping away, listen to his podcast. But
can I just say that I had a video staff meeting all morning with the cat tree behind me, and he was definitely showing off. He was doing all his like running in his sleep. He was twisting himself into a pretzel. He was showing how impressively, as a cat, he can sleep entirely on his back like a person does.
Did everyone comment on it?
No, because everyone's very professional, and I'm the person with the cat. So
okay, so so you have a really nice interaction there where Willow and Tara have gotten Miss Kitty Fantastico, a very cute cat, who really, really frustrated those people who write blooper and goof information online, because every blooper I saw about this episode, or every goof I saw about this episode, was like, this cat magically teleports between shots. It's a tiny fucking kitten. Do you expect it to like
sit still? Yeah,
sit still. Anyway, so that's fine. And they kind of very vaguely talk around moving in together, which is really cute. It's very like, for one thing, they've only been going for a couple of weeks, but that's whatever. But Willow was saying that Buffy and her are probably not going to be dorming together next year, and yeah, it's really nice. So you're right. What happens with the Scoobies at the end? Well, for one thing, Spike does specifically trying to incite homophobia.
He does,
and Willow's fears of the gang reacting homophobically, because he says, "Oh, I understand that the rest of them don't really care for your
phase.
Your magical phase, and you used to be a useful techno nerd, and now you're just a disgusting witch." And it's like casting this like dichotomy again between technology, in this case being heteronormativity, or
represented by lines of Matrix like code flying across her CRT TV.
Yeah, exactly, and homosexuality being represented by witchiness. So that's hilarious, but. And that's interesting in the sense that I was sitting there, I was thinking, is this kind of dodgy homophobic writing? And probably to some degree, but also I don't think Spike is very moral. I don't think I think the tendency to write villains as being, would never be homophobic but would murder a person is just like a bizarre affectation of the 21st century. But
I don't think there's any specific malice in Spike's actions around that being the particular pressure point, just that he knows is something that someone might be sensitive about. So I definitely have that reticence of potentially reading it as like gay panic writing. But I'm willing to say I think it holds off on that. I think it's just like, this is obviously something that Willow, who's usually such a staunch ally for Buffy, and so in unflappable. Like, look at her interaction with Parker earlier in the season, where Parker was trying to convince her. This is actually something that she's vulnerable enough about that he can twist it.
Absolutely. And then when she interacts with everyone, So she's like, you just don't like that Tara's my girlfriend. And Xander's like, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, wait, what? And there's a really wonderful exclamation from a drunk Giles from up on his bedroom like
floor, presumably.
Yeah, just being like, blimey, or bloody hell, or something. And it's just ridiculous. I relate it. But yeah, so I think it's an important thing to integrate, is that that is a concern that people have when coming out, and yeah, whatever.
And there's no dramatic coming out speech. There's no episode all about it. It's just along with the rest of the mess they've gotten themselves into.
Yeah.
Like Willow has a girlfriend. Buffy's boyfriend was like, Buffy's boyfriends are beating the shit out of each other in this episode. One is a genetically manipulated super soldier, and the other is dead.
Yeah. So I think we can firmly agree that Spike very much is playing the role of Iago in this episode, which is pretty funny.
You mean the parrot from Aladdin?
I do, actually. Yeah. I'd have to imagine that was the intention behind the character, given how specifically Shakespearean Joss Whedon is known to be. The other thing I wanted to note about so I specifically thought that the interaction at the end of the episode between them all was specifically well written and well acted. The other thing to note there is that Anya and Tara go off into the bathroom together. It is one of the many times that they get lumped in together by being kind of like the newly scoobed.
Yeah. The girlfriends.
And what's nice about that is that they have a nice little interaction. They're like, do you think this will go on long? And there's very little discomfort between them, which is kind of surprising in some ways. But also the argument in the background that you can hear over here, this is probably more of a Buffy bit, but whatever, is actually the argument from Pangs, bizarrely.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's bizarre. That is odd.
Yeah. And
there's no way they're seeing us from that episode. That wouldn't make any sense, no. That's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of other conflict that we have that's also kind of driving a wedge, we have Angel comes to town.
Yep. There's a real love triangle moment here, except for the fact that it's all based on Xander being a little shithead by telling Riley that how Angel lost his soul. And
really going out of his way to describe it as well.
Yeah, and Riley overreacting like the straight idiot he is.
Getting very defensive, assuming that Buffy went to LA to sleep with Angel, and so when he sees Angel and the slightly contrived setup where Angel gets topped by some initiative goons, he assumes that Angel has gone bad and then tries to fight him.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I saw written about this episode was interesting was that when Buffy comes in and stops them fighting, the two of them are clearly considering continue going, but recognize that Buffy could just stop both of them because she is stronger than both of them.
Yeah,
and I think that's a really nice little image of the two brawny, ridiculous men fighting, and her being like, I can just beat the both of you up.
Yeah, they both entirely incite this. Riley pulls a gun on Angel at one point, and Angel, who could have stopped this, provokes him.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically implies that he's here to see Buffy, and they go etc etc, and then Buffy says, I will put both of you in the hospital if you don't stop, and does anyone think that I'm exaggerating? And then they stop. So yeah, it's absolutely, she's a Slayer, back the fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, in terms of those interactions, Riley does eventually trust Buffy, but it's kind of after her, she said, why would you think I would do that? Which she's totally right about. Why would Riley think that she would sleep with Angel? One of the things that Mark Field notes about this episode is that when Buffy sees Riley and she has a big scar or big cut in her face from when she had an interaction with Adam where Forrest dies.
No,
he never asks about where she got the cut.
That's true. She doesn't have a cut. Pardon me. She doesn't have a cut on her head because she fought with Adam. She fought with Adam. Forrest is killed. She runs away on a mostly flat hill, trips and hits her head.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not Adam's fault.
Fair enough.
I would argue that in court. But yeah, he's less concerned about her well-being in that respect, and also, we're so caught up in his jealousy that he thinks that she's about to break up with him or say that she slept with Angel, And I actually did lose track of what she actually was about this stage one, which was that Forrest had been skewered.
Yes.
Forrest, Killian the Forrest, at the end of his less of an arc and more of a straight line in terms of his character.
That's true. But no, what's notable there is that, what I was going to note there is that Riley never asks about her cut on her forehead, and Angel specifically does when he sees her.
Oh, I see. Absolutely. Okay. That's
Which I found very worrying to some degree. I think a specific writing note. Doug Petrie tends to be like quite structured and quite like referential in his writing. Actually, did you notice just like the absolute variety of pop culture reference in this episode? It was much higher than usual. Yeah, it was really dense, and I actually found quite interesting the spike in referencing the Yoko Factor, and that the common theory that Yoko contributed massively to the Beatles breaking up, said that he didn't think that was true. That was happening anyway. She just happened to be there. Yeah, and I also liked how. I liked how when they were talking about that, what's his name? Adam says, his favorite Beatles song is Helter Skelter, and Spike says, of course it is. Do you know what the reference is there? I do, the Manson family. Yeah, exactly. Weirdly enough, just as an aside, I have been reading the Buffy comics through, which I've mentioned. Disgusting. I've gotten to one of the few that's kind of set in this depth of the fourth season. It goes on an absolutely wild ride that posits that the mayor survived the explosion of the school as a ghost, and then like he's possessing like a dead blackbird to spy on Buffy, and then possessing various, like he can possess vampires, and if he states he survives, and he's just going to haunt her forever, and it's a whole thing. And there's also a gas element where in the comics and some of the books they posit this 18th century Slayer called Lucy Hangover, who after she died becomes a guardian of the spirit world. So this is supposedly meant to be in between episodes we've seen, and they conjure up this 18th century Slayer. It's like, oh yes, everyone knows Lucy, our old friend Lucy, who gives us quest information, essentially. Not a thing. Okay. But where Agam comes into it is it posits that the mayor, as the ghost, sees the initiative setting up in the town, and as a vampire, the mayor kills the soldier who will become Agam, who is meant to be Maggie Walsh's first born, essentially, like her first favorite child, who then moves on to Riley after Agam is killed. So she takes what's left of Agam and starts turning him into Project 314. Okay. Absolute conjectural nonsense. But it's notable as being the only example in the wider Buffy universe where they try to explain anything about who Agam was before he was this. Yeah, I mean, like you said it before during this season, but like the Adam structure is just so weak. I mean, like what we know about Adam is that he was created, he had like, what I keep saying is we've seen no show of force. We haven't seen him be incredibly strong, incredibly powerful. They haven't used a bazooka on him at any point. Which they came up with within like one episode for the judge. Just try something, try anything, as opposed to just kind of like watching from the distance. It's a classic case of implying that you have a great plan, which, as you and I have said, is categorized by virtue of season structure as being an apocalypse, but may not actually precipitate the end of the world. It's just there may be loads of demons. But when she finds Adam in this episode, he's just kind of standing in a cave somewhere waiting to be deployed into the plot, and presenting very little threat, really. Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I would note is we said this last time in what was the episode where Giles sings? Oh yeah, Superstar. We said this in Superstar, but in this episode, was it Superstar? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? No, it was Where the Wild Things Are. Where the Wild Things Are, because they went to find Giles because they couldn't get to and they were Buffy all horny for Giles. Yes. Yeah. So in this episode, he does sing Freebird by Leonard Skinner. And he plays guitar for it as well, which is great. Charming. His beautiful voice. Joel, how did you feel given that Rupert Giles was your sexual awakening? And Freebird is the song that you put on whenever you're fighting hard bosses. And when I'm jogging, I'm having trouble jogging. I quite enjoyed it. I love directionless Giles, I have to say, between just progressively drinking expensive but large quantities of scotch and singing classic rock songs. Like, I'm all here for it. Goals. Okay, so we actually should move on because you have a meeting in about 15 minutes. So let's move on to the Buffy bits, shall we?
Absolutely.
Great.
So I will start off by saying that there's, again, some weird initiative stuff in this episode. You have this character of Colonel McNamara that they're trying to make into the initiative voice box, essentially.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, for something set in 2000, he's video conferencing with the government, but like...
It's clearly a pre-recorded like message.
Yes, absolutely, because this TV is big and deep, you know, so it's definitely not currently like live linked anywhere. And he says with exceptional or with tremendous sincerity things like, "These boys here, sir, they're exceptional boys. I like these boys." And it's very, very basic army grunt kind of behavior. Some good comedy in this episode. The idea of Spike drinking warmed up blood is absolutely disgusting.
Yep.
And also Xander dressing Riley up in enormous parachute pants that he has to wear around campus. And Riley's like a really inexplicable thing, but which I found very funny. When he gets pissed off at Buffy, he leaves and he says, "I should go anyway. I have to plug my trousers in every 2 hours to charge them." Just doesn't mean anything, but it's a funny image.
Yeah. I have a couple of Buffy bits too there. So one is that Spike at one point in this episode mentions a wild rumpus, which is only notable because it's a reference to Where the Wild Things Are, the book. So, I mean, interesting there. There's a point where Giles is playing the music at that in his apartment. He's just singing alone to himself, and the camera's panning beautifully all around him. And then he just screams at the top of his voice in the really beautiful scream, and Spike is there. It's really great. At one point, Riley talks about, or Buffy says that we're not going to go deconstructing Angel to Riley, and I was like, you know what,
Rip
Buffy,
us, yeah.
I'm also not going to go deconstructing the TV show Angel, so that's fair.
Xander says that he's been fired so far from Starbucks and a phone sex line.
Yeah.
Haunting images, all told.
And Anya also does say that Xander is a Viking in the sack. Jesus Christ. Yeah, and when Spike is trying to make everyone be homophobic, or trying to say that Willow's getting homophobic abuse, he says that everyone thinks it's a phase, that you'll get over it, and you're being trendy. So
I haven't heard that about gayness in a long time. Trendy,
yeah. And the last thing I'll say is actually two more things. One is that they actually do use the title of episode in the episode, which is reasonably rare for Buffy, really, actually. I can't think of the last time it happened. Probably The Initiative.
True. Superstar.
Superstar didn't have the word superstar in it at any point. Xander says, and I'm paraphrasing here because I took down the quote and I immediately misremembered it or forgot it while I was taking it down. But he says, "Just because you're better than us doesn't mean you can be superior."
Yeah, I think that's pretty much exactly it. Yeah. One of the very funny kind of digs I thought Spike got in was he says to Xander they assume he's enrolling in the army because they were saying something about him being all he can be. Yeah. Or maybe they meant be all you can be.
They also, I like the kind of suggestion that like Xander thought that they were planning on shipping him off to the army against his will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Entirely possible. And very last thing from me.
Okay.
Riley refers to Angel as the billowing coat king of pain.
In terms of fashion, Willow is wearing a green sweater at some point during this episode. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. The really notable thing in this episode was Riley wearing his parachute pants from Xander and referring to them as clown clothes, which I really appreciated. Actually, that's all the fashion notes I have.
Yeah, Giles had a lovely suede jacket on when he was singing his guitar.
Don't you hate suede jackets?
I like them on men of a certain vintage.
Very good. Okay. Death count is very straightforward. Just Forrest Charles.
Gates, apparently.
Oh, Gates, is it? Okay, sorry. Yeah, and that's it for the episode.
Yeah, so next week we're going to be, for Buffy, we're going to be going into
Primeval.
Yeah, which I would consider Primeval and Restless to be a 2-part finale, even though they're not strictly a 2-parter, but they're so intrinsically linked for me.
Interesting. I'm not sure if I'd have to take that perspective.
Yeah, no, I consider these two like the end of the season tied together. Okay. But we'll look at that. But I'm excited for that. I'm excited for both of them. I do think that the last 2 episodes of the season are particularly strong. So that's going to be fun.
That's interesting because Primeval is often read as being a little weak. So we'll find out. Okay. And rating, Joe. What's your rating for this episode?
I will give this episode probably an 8.7 for dicks.
Okay. Very good. I'm going to give this episode 8.0 catnip problems out of 10. Tell me about tell me about your 8.7. That's quite high.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought everyone was just on form acting wise. I thought
that's for sure true.
Yeah, I thought it was, I've said before, Buffy isn't always great at giving everyone screen time and giving an episode, which is fine. They like to focus in, but I felt everyone really showed the fullness of the ensemble here. I thought Spike's role was exceptional. I think I actually can't believe how much I've always liked Spike. I like him so much more in this rewatch because he's really come into himself, having been given the opportunity to do something.
He's a real plot instigator.
Yeah,
he really gets things moving.
He's really mechanically useful, and I like that. And yeah, I just thought there's some funny moments.
If I become mechanically useful, will you like me?
No, it's too far gone.
Okay.
I thought the conflict between Angel and Riley is kind of expected, necessary, but still funny to watch.
Yeah. But I mean, it's so uncomfortable because the amount of chemistry between Buffy and Angel at the end of the episode, where he's saying "I don't like him" about Riley, is palpable, and it never exists with her and Riley.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
So, okay. Oh, we didn't talk about this week. We probably should have. This is on camera. Is The Last of Us 2. We finished it, but I have so many thoughts about it. I would do a whole episode of a podcast about it, but it would have to be spoiler heavy because all the interesting stuff about that, everything we've said so far about the game is mechanical, and it's about all you can say without getting to really heavy spoiler territory. And yeah, loved it. I thought it was I think it may be the best game I've ever played. Yeah, I think playing through the game with you in that depth is not something I dig. It's something that actually happened to me in my life, so I need to take a little bit of distance. But it is going to be a controversial, in the most literal sense of the word, game, I think, for years to come. Yeah. But a remarkable text, a remarkable experience. Yeah. So. Okay. So the Cordelia chase.
Yeah. So this week I will speak briefly about this episode because it is not very. In many ways, not significant and not very good, but I feel like I don't want to rag on these episodes too much. They are what they are. They serve a purpose. They're a week-to-week, monster-of-the-week adventure kind of thing.
Gunn sister actor was really good.
Yes. So basically, this episode is called Warzone. It introduces Charles Gunn, who becomes a main cast member until the conclusion of the show. I believe he's in every episode from now on.
Oh, really?
And he starts out, the premise being, the premise of the episode is really about trying to show wealth and class stratification in LA. So we go from the gang taking a case from David Nesbitt, who is a billionaire software developer, to introducing Gunn and his community, which are squatting in tenement areas, living kind of like food to mouth, and trying to construct this vampire hunting rig and gang, for lack of a better description, to clear out the area from vamps who are terrorizing them. And Gunn kind of acts as this community leader, and comes into conflict with Angel when Angel kind of wanders into it on in service of the case, and gets misconstrued for a bag vamp, essentially. Yeah. So there's some interesting elements to it. What I would say that is maybe poor about it as an episode is you essentially have a crew of writers who, to my knowledge and to my interpretation, are not particularly well versed in black culture or this kind of area of LA, or this kind of the depth of these issues, and trying to portray them in a meaningful way. It's a heavy issue for an Angel episode, and I don't think it necessarily says much about it. And I would argue that probably some of the portrayal of the crew are stereotypical.
Yeah, I mean, Gunn's entry for a character that I think the actor puts a lot of work into making likable and good, is such a thin stereotype. I mean, he's a street urchin who is fighting back against the system, angry young black man protecting his family kind of stuff. And it's all those are all totally appropriate in lots of ways, in the sense that that's a lived experience. Well, maybe not the fighting back against the system kind of stuff, but it's
vampires.
But you could have sat down and written him some character that wasn't just a stereotype. Yeah. If you get me, as in give him something to humanize him, because the problem with stereotypes often is that they can often be a good starting point, but you have to add onto them to create people. And in this situation, they've relied purely on stereotype because they think that racial minorities and minorities in general can be simplified to these traits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're seeing, obviously, particularly in recent days, that like there's different layers, I suppose, racial stereotyping that can happen. Some of it is more passive and is more systemic or unknowing. And I think in this case, I think they probably did set out to try and write something and say, oh, there's this whole underworld, or in their terms, or lower level or hidden level to LA that's not seen from the high rises, and people are fighting for their lives down there. And I think it was an attempt, but it doesn't read particularly compelling. But let's say what are the good things about the episode? I do like Gunn's actor. I do think he brings a lot of skill to what he does, and he's very engaging.
He's gay.
He is gay. He's recently come out, which we've discussed before on the podcast, which adds a whole new dimension to this. I think that the actor who plays Gunn's sister, who eventually gets vamped and has a stake, it does do a pretty good job, and actually quite a compelling job. There's a couple of wonky canon moments in it, in the sense that she, after she's turned, is kind of emphatically saying to Gunn, let me take care of you now, and she's not trying to trick him, and I don't think that tracks with anyone else who has been vamped that we've seen.
Totally agree. I was thinking that too.
And also there is a scene which is strongly portrayed that, like, when Angel breaks into Gunn's compound, he reaches around the corner through the mystical barrier that keeps him out and pulls someone outside to let him in, and I don't think that isn't possible. There's some cool contraptions that they use to trap the vamps and all the kind of stuff. There's like
they have a murder mobile. They've
got some stakes basically attached to the front of a jeep that they run into people, and they fire like a Gatling gun of stakes, which is all fun ideas. And perhaps one of the most crucially useful things in it is that at the end of the episode, Gunn is like, are you going to come in here and save us, be my daddy figure, teach us what we need to do? And Angel says, I can't tell you anything about life that you haven't learned firsthand, and maybe one day I'm going to need help from you, and that's kind of all I have to say, which is a good note to end on. I think there's a whole side plot with the software developer who is meant to have been a more recurring character. He appears a couple more times. He's reasonably funny to watch. He's like a nebbish software guy, and
he is the voice for Mr. Frond and a bunch of other characters in Bob's Burgers.
And there's a whole side plot where they go to a demon brothel essentially, and that's kind of how he's gotten admired in this world. So like served a purpose, has some interesting ideas, not really a starter in the long term for me. I would probably give it maybe a 6 failed feminist gestures.
Exactly what I was going to say. 6 failed feminist gestures. I wasn't hugely offended by it. Well, I kind of was at the points, but overall it was like reasonably watchable.
I was going to say, so there's some joke in there about, I can excuse racism but not vampires, but like it's not going to read. It's not going to read the way I want it to read. So I think that's us for this week. On a rainy afternoon, we hope you're keeping out well out there. We are looking forward for you joining us next week for the start of the end for season 4, Primeval. And until then, if you enjoyed this episode, if you have any feedback, if you have any thoughts about what's coming up for the end of season 4, please let us know.
If you want to hear a spoiler filled bonus episode just about The Last of Us, let us know.
Yeah, we will absolutely talk about The Last of Us for a whole hour. And otherwise, if you enjoyed the episode, let us know. Tell your friends, tell your drunk librarian. And we will see you next time. Where born, Brian? Got your name wrong there. Where boying?
Where born? I'm Borny Boys.
See you next time on Borny Boys. See ya.
Bye.